First, he vomits up the stone his wife had given him in place of baby Zeus. According to tradition, that rock is the cornerstone of ancient Greece's most sacred site, the Temple of Delphi, home of the oracle.
Delphi is a sanctuary in Greece where people would come from all around to consult with God. It was a direct phone line up to heaven to ask the answer to anything you wanted.
To this day, thousands of years after the story was first told, the stone that Cronus supposedly vomited is still there.
At the very center of the temple complex at Delphi is an egg-shaped stone that was understood to be the exact stone that played the role of being the substitute for Zeus that Cronos swallowed. And if you go there today to the Temple of Delphi, the locals will still tell you that the stone that's there is the actual one that was in Cronos' belly.
In the myth, after throwing up the sacred stone, Cronus regurgitates Zeus's 5 siblings. And they are ready to join Zeus's revolution.
What marks Zeus as a different kind of leader from those that have come before is his intelligence. He's able to persuade and convince those around him that he should be leader, and he's able to build coalitions.
Zeus now has his siblings by his side, but he still needs more muscle to take on the Titans. And there are some other estranged members of the family who are out for revenge. Forgotten brothers of Cronus, the Cyclops, and the 100 Handers. But to find them, Zeus has to go to hell.
Cronos had feared the powers of these 100 Handers and the Cyclopses, and he locked them down into Tartarus. Zeus knew that if he could get their power on his side, he could marshal it to his own ends. He goes down and talks to the 100 Handers and says, "I will pay you great respect. And I know that my father Cronos has mistreated you. Now I've freed you, and now you owe me." And even they are moved, and they say, "Yes, great Zeus, we realize not only are you very powerful, but you also know how to treat people well. So we appreciate that, and we will now fight on your side."
In gratitude for being liberated, the Cyclops present Zeus with a gift: the power of lightning.
Lightning is one of the most devastatingly powerful forces in nature. When lightning arcs through the air is briefly raised to a temperature that can be more than 50,000 degrees. That's 5 times the surface temperature of the sun.
The lightning bolt gives Zeus the power to rule the universe. With this lightning bolt, no one's going to be able to overthrow him.
The battle lines are drawn. The Titans will fight from Mount Othrys, the Olympians from Mount Olympus. Between them lies the plain of Thessaly. But this isn't just a mythical battlefield.
Thessaly is actually, if we take into consideration the modern map of Greece, is the central part of Greece. It's the biggest plain and the most fertile plain in Greece from ancient times to today.
Thessaly has a long, bloody history, stretching from the Greco-Persian Wars of the 5th century BC to the World Wars of the 20th century AD. And it is here that the ultimate battle of the gods will play out. Armed with a weapon of mass destruction and an elite fighting force, Zeus braces for an earth-shattering battle. And to this day, a real place may still bear the scars. Mythology's defining moment is now at hand. The battle between father and son is about to begin. It's the old guard of Cronus and his Titans versus the new blood of Zeus and the Olympians. The outcome will determine who controls everything. From the top of Mount Olympus, Zeus sends a fury of lightning down upon his father's army. The fighting shakes the earth to its core.
The only way we can conceive of this battle is simply worlds colliding, all the forces in the universe smashing together at once.
You've got the 100-handers over on one side that are ripping off huge hunks of mountain and throwing mountains at the other side. From the Titans, you've got a lot of just brute force and brute strength. They're able to take a punch and keep coming back, coming back, coming back.
It's an apocalyptic scene, and not entirely a myth. Experts have recently determined that a real event, just as frightening, actually happened in the ancient world. About 3,600 years ago, the Greek island of Santorini experienced one of the most devastating volcanic explosions ever. Its effects were felt as far away as California.
The volcanic blast was the single largest seismic event on Earth in the last 27,000 years. To give you an idea of how massive it was, imagine a mountain about 3.5 miles tall being blown into the sky all at once.
In 2006, scientists discovered that the Santorini eruption was even larger than originally believed. Excavations uncovered deposits of volcanic ash piled 20 stories deep, blanketing a 30-mile radius around the island. Based on this evidence, it's now believed the eruption unleashed the equivalent power of 50,000 Hiroshima bombs. An explosion that powerful would have annihilated much of the Greek world. For the survivors, who knew little about how volcanoes work, it could only have been the wrath of the gods.
When the ancient myth tellers told the story of great cataclysmic battles that shook the earth, they weren't doing so in a vacuum. There hadn't been massive seismic events that had happened in the memory of some of the earlier generations of Greeks before these myth tellers had written down their stories.
As the clash of the gods plays out in the myth, it appears Zeus is finally about to seize control of the universe. His powerful allies have tipped the balance, and the Olympians are closing in on victory. But the Titans have one last weapon at their disposal. From the depths of Tartarus, they call forth a colossal beast, Typhon.
Typhon is a tremendously strong, powerful monster that's challenging Zeus himself. It's a last-gasp effort, and the final monster, the final challenge he has to put down in order to secure his reign over the universe.
It is a supernatural deathmatch, a decisive struggle between good and evil. And it will all come down to the ultimate weapon.
As Zeus and Typhon are engaged in this final epic battle, Zeus eventually gets the upper hand and wins via his lightning bolt.
With one final assault, Zeus drives Typhon and his Titan allies down into Tartarus, where they are damned to spend eternity in a fiery abyss. According to the ancients, it was across the Mediterranean, on the island of Sicily, that Zeus's enemies descended into hell through the volcanic crater of Mount Etna. Local legend says Typhon is still inside and has been behind all of the volcano's eruptions over the centuries.
Greeks used this myth as a way of explaining why lava was constantly pouring out of the volcano. They explained that as either the remnants of Zeus's lightning constantly shooting out, or of the flames of Typho, who's still breathing just a little bit, exploding flame out of the center of the volcano.
It is also said that Typhon causes destructive windstorms. In fact, his name is the basis for the word typhoon. But in the myth, the storm clouds have broken, for the time being. Zeus's victory over his father makes him the king of the gods, the absolute ruler of the universe. So goes the myth. But what is the link to reality? In 2003, at the base of Mount Olympus, a lost temple was discovered. It was the centerpiece of an ancient city known as Dion, and it was dedicated to Zeus.
Dion was a city that was built at the base of Mount Olympus, and so it's very close to the home of the Olympian gods and goddesses and where Zeus lived in Greek mythology. In fact, the name of the town, Dion, means Zeus.
The Dion temple dates back to the 5th century BC, the golden age of Greek mythology. Scattered around the site are marble blocks with unmistakable engravings. Eagles. In ancient Greece, eagles were the divine symbol of Zeus. But there's more. This headless statue was found in a nearby riverbed. Carved into its 2,400-year-old base are 3 words: Zeus the highest. There's a debate among experts about what this reference to the highest means. Some believe this statue could be a missing link between Greece's worship of many gods and the single God philosophy of Christians and Jews, and that this find is proof that the Greeks were embracing the idea of one God on their own before the arrival of Christianity.
The Greeks sometimes identified that highest god with Zeus. After all, the word Zeus in its dative form, Theos, is where we get our word Deus. So there's an etymological reason to understand Zeus as the highest deity. Starting in about the 3rd and 2nd and 1st centuries BC, we have different philosophical and theological schools that arise and that start to propose a very strong view that there is only one God and that all the ancient stories and all the ancient tales are actually just metaphors that reflect different aspects of what this divinity is all about.
For the people who worshipped at Dion, it's clear that Zeus was different from all the other Greek gods. In fact, he may well have been the only one that mattered. In the myth, Zeus has achieved the absolute power he has long sought. But that power will soon be threatened by an unexpected foe. The king of the gods is about to be betrayed by the person closest to him. Zeus has won his epic clash with the Titans. He now sits atop Mount Olympus as king of the gods and master of mankind. The ancient Greeks worshipped Zeus above all others, even though he was fatally flawed.
The ancient Greek gods are very relatable. They have faults, they have strengths, they have weaknesses, they have all the things that normal human beings would. In fact, when the Greeks in these early times think about their gods, one way of trying to understand it is that they see their gods as being a lot like you and I, just really, really big.
According to the myth, Zeus has one very human weakness that threatens to be his undoing: an uncontrollable sex drive.
Zeus likes the ladies. That's one of the most endearing and enraging things about him, is that he has this very, very human character, that he never saw a girl that he didn't like.
Zeus will stop at nothing to seduce his conquests. He even uses disguise.
Zeus visits mortal women in various guises, whatever it takes to consummate the relationship. So in different tales, we hear of Zeus turning into an eagle, turning into a swan, turning into a bull, turning into all these different shapes, turning into human beings to mimic a woman's husband's face, to trick the women as best he can into having union with